Hello, everyone, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And joining me today, all the way from the Big Apple, New York, is a first time guest here on the show. Now, my guest is an author who enjoys crafting epic sci fi fantasy stories. He's written many books throughout his life, none of which you or I have probably read because they're buried in a box in his storage unit. And in 2021, my guest started to outline a story that he felt could be worthy of publication one day. And that epic tale became his debut novel, The Ore Monger, which you can see right here, viewers and listeners. And outside of storytelling, he is a happily married husband, proud Muslim, a devoted cat dad, a loving uncle, a tattooed enthusiast, a comic book collector, DC Comics specifically, and an obnoxiously proud New Yorker, which you can see right here on the
That's
tattoos
my
on
DC
his
Comics
arm.
tattoo.
Nice. So, without further ado, viewers and listeners, let's give a huge round of applause to our guest, Mr. Zaid Hasan. Zaid, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. What an amazing introduction. I appreciate you going through all of that.
No
Um,
problem, Zaid. No problem. And honestly, thank you for coming on the show because I've been keeping up to date with all of your socials, and I have to say, your book, The Ore Monger, it really grabbed my eye. So let's actually
Thank you so much.
dive right into that as a little teaser for our viewers and listeners. What can you tell us of The Ore Monger?
Yeah, so the Ore Monger, I like to compare it to like a lollipop. You know, you have your outside that's the candy outside that has this story of a group of protagonists who realize that the world leaders have historically been uh, washing history and all of the knowledge that they've been keeping from our protagonists is full of lies. And so you have this surface story of all these protagonists coming together in their own various arcs and their own various plot lines, eventually coming together to take on the lies and the deceit that have been spread throughout their continent. And you know, when you get deeper into that, there's a lot more. There are heavier socio-political themes that
Mm.
go into the lives and that govern the plots of all these different characters. And so it's kind of like takes a moment. You know, a lot of people feel like the beginning might be a little slow, but once you start unraveling all of the deeper, you know, that candy center of the book, you really get the deeper nuance of what exactly is trying to be shown and how it correlates to a lot of the sociology and the politics and the societies that we see, you know, in the real world.
Fascinating. So, would you say that the world of the Ormonger is like your own created world, or is it kind of based off of Earth or a specific place on Earth, but given its own identity?
So that's a good way to put it. It is based off of, well, it's definitely high fantasy. It is a world
Hmm.
that I created. However, the cultures within this world are heavily influenced by specific cultures in the real world. For an example, we have the Doru, who are basically shapeshifters. And so
Mm.
they shift into an animal form. They have a human form and an animal form. And so, but in their culture is heavily influenced by Indian culture. I am from the subcontinent. My lineage goes back to the subcontinent, the Indian subcontinent. So I'm very, very familiar with Indian culture, and I sort of infused that into the clothing they wear, the food they eat, and then I did something very similar with all three of the different human clans. I've broken the world up into different human clans, three different human clans, and each of these is sort of inspired by a different culture. You have in the underwater city of Seabed, where they have a culture that's inspired and influenced by Spanish culture in Spain.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, and then you have Ever Ember, which their culture is sort of inspired by Japanese culture. And then you have the Anji, who are, can fly and they have wings, and they're inspired by West African cultures.
Fascinating. I absolutely love that you broke the world in, because there's going to be another question in the interview. But what I really appreciate when it comes to writing, high epic fantasy, we tend to think that high epic fantasy only falls within, the scopes of medieval Europe. Typically, high epic fantasy uses that as like the caveat, the
Yep.
main premise. But as I talked with a lot of authors, and from what you've just explained to me, as well as the viewers and listeners, high epic fantasy can draw upon a multitude of different cultures from around the world, which I absolutely love. So let's actually talk a little bit about you in particular, Zaid. How did this passion for writing come about? Were you always a creative individual, or did this creativity come about later in life?
I think it feels a little arrogant to say, but I feel like I've always been creative. Um, I've been writing stories my whole life. When I was very young, I wrote my own comic book. I wrote a lot of poetry. I was published in like a young New York poets magazine thing once. I don't even know, like I don't know what the name was, but I have it again buried in my storage unit somewhere. A whole bunch of stuff from my childhood, stories, poetry, comic books, a whole bunch of stuff that I've written and done. So I feel like I've been creative when it comes to language and expressing myself through writing and storytelling my whole life. And it wasn't until 2021, a friend of mine who is also into writing, shout out to Dan, he came to me and asked me if I wanted to be in a writing group with him and another friend. And so I joined the writing group, and it was then that I started crafting the story that eventually became the Ore Monger. And it was then that I really realized that publication was something I wanted to pursue. I say it as the story that eventually became the Ore Monger, because that first draft that I wrote in
Hmm.
2021 is a completely different book than what was published in 2024. It was a 3.5 year writing process. I started uh, outlining and plotting. Shout out to all my plotters out there. Uh, and I started plotting in April of 2021, and it didn't publish until November of 2024. So it's a 3.5 year process in which this book went through 8 different iterations, and each of those iterations were vastly different than the previous one. I don't think I had. I don't know if authors, other authors, self-published authors, uh, like make a few changes and then count that as another draft. But I don't really count it personally for me as another draft unless major changes have taken place. And yeah, so going from draft to draft, it was massive, massive jumps. So
Mm.
character names changed when the first draft had no cultures. It was just straight medieval fantasy, the typical that you see. And then I think by the third draft, I had all these cultures infused into it. Yeah, I was still in the fourth and fifth draft and changing names. I was in the sixth draft and adding and removing whole characters and their stories. So it was major changes all the way throughout. So what I started with draft one, it's not what was published in the final published draft.
Absolutely, 100%. So, would you say, I know you said that 2021 was the beginning of this journey for the Oremonger, but is there a specific moment that you would consider in those 3 years your aha moment when you want to take that draft that would become the Oremonger?
Probably with the completion of the first draft. When
Okay.
I finally finished that first draft, that's probably the aha moment, because I even printed it out and I don't even know why. I just went to Staples and I just printed it out and put it into a binder. I think I still have it. Um, and I when I saw it there in my hands, I was like, okay, I can write a book. I could do this. This is something that's feasible. And so I just went with it after that. After that, it was like a train that couldn't be stopped. It just kept going. And it's been going since. I feel very blessed that I don't often get. I should knock on some wood or something, but I don't often get writer's block. I and in the rare moments that I do get writer's block, I just throw on like Avengers Endgame or like The Dark Knight or Game of Thrones or something to get the creative juices flowing. I watch something that Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'll put something on that I feel like has great storytelling, and it really inspires me. It brings my writing back, and so I feel blessed. I feel blessed that it's been a consistent journey now. Now I'm getting on to 4 years now, and the energy, the flow, the motivation has taken me beyond book one now, where in the past 4 or 5 months since the release of the Ore Monger, I've completed two drafts of book two, and I'm like a quarter of the way done with the first draft of book three. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind for the past 4 months. I've just been sitting and writing and writing and writing, without any loss of motivation, because I think once the Ore Monger released, I was like, like tunnel vision, like I knew exactly where the story was going. So I burned out two drafts of book two. It's now with readers, and with the beta readers and a sensitivity reader, and I'm just working on the first draft of book three.
Awesome. That's very, very good to hear, Zaid. That is very, very good. And that actually will bring up a question later in the interview when it talks about, going through with transforming, a book that was initially a single standalone and expanding upon it into a trilogy or series of books. Before we get to that, let's talk about the first book, and rather the 3 years it took to go from point A to point B.
Sure.
So, as a little icebreaker, when you began writing the initial draft, outlining or plotting what would be the Ormonger, what were the goals you had going into this book as the author, as well as the promises you are making to your readers? Because I know some authors, they don't necessarily have a promise to their readers because at the time they're only thinking of themselves. They only want to get their book out for themselves. But some people are different. So, can you talk us through that initial process?
Yeah. I'm not really sure if I might be one of those authors who just had a promise to myself. But really what it was I've always been, I feel, conscious of a lot of the political and social things that encompass our society, and I try to stay as conscious of those things as I can.
Mm,
And I knew that I wanted to include a lot of those heavy socio-political themes in my writing, in my art, because if I'm not saying something important, why even open my mouth? So
right.
um, I just felt like if I'm going to do something that I feel is might reach other people, whether they share my opinions or they don't, I'm happy to have a dialogue and a discourse with anybody. But whether they share in my views or not, I thought it was important that I put some of those views and some of the important messages that I feel don't get talked about enough into the book, so that people can enjoy, again, on the surface level, a fun adventure story that has some light humor and a lot of epic adventure, a lot of science,
Right.
and underneath all of that has these heavy socio-political themes that really can help you think and think, oh, is this something that I believe, or is this something that I agree with? Is this something I disagree with? And they can hop into my DMs and we can have a conversation about anything. My DMs are always open. So that's really, for me, the biggest promise was that I'm saying something important with my art. And so I think that's really where the most of the promise was. And for the readers, I just hope they enjoy, above all else. The ideas that came from that I had mostly came from dreams for me. I had a number of different dreams of storylines, and then I sort of mashed them together to make the different plots that intersect and form the Ore Monger, the book. So I hope it's as fun for them as it is for me, aside from all the heavy socio-political stuff. I hope that it's really an enjoyable story above all else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And oh, apologies. Hey, that's my dog. 1 second. I'll make
No
sure I fix that.
problem.
All right, back.
Yeah, no problem. I have.
Stop barking. That would be nice. But where was I? Oh, yes, yes. So as you were talking about before, that when you start writing the draft of this book, the only promise you're making to yourself that is, you're true to the core that you set out with, which is you want to tell, first off, an amazing story, but also have those real world themes that are intertwined with the narrative that the reader can pick up and understand, which
Yep,
I
exactly.
absolutely wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
So then going forward from that, from the initial outline phase to writing the first few drafts.
Mhm.
What was the reaction like from friends and family when they learned that you were doing this, as well as the response from your beta readers? Were both parties, very positive, very critical, or somewhere down the middle?
So my beta readers, I'll start with them because my family, friends, the people who know me in my personal life, they didn't really know much about it until it was close to publication. So really, the people that knew I was doing this were the connections that I made on Instagram, on the
Right.
writing bookstagram community. Um, and so with that, I was able to tap into these different resources and all these different people who helped me along the way to be my beta readers, my sensitivity readers. I had a number of sensitivity readers, as well as eventually ARC readers as well. And so their responses were all, I want to say, overall positive. Of course, there was a lot of constructive feedback, and that's really what I was hoping for. I appreciate positive feedback, but positive feedback is not going to chip at the marble to build the statue. Only constructive
Absolutely.
feedback can do that. So I was really hoping to make this book the best version that it could be, and all of my readers helped with that. Anybody who read was able to give me constructive feedback and provide me with the things that I needed to improve the book. So that's what I really appreciate from my readers. And then when I got much closer to publication, like a few months out, that's when I started telling people in my personal life that I was doing this. My family knew, but I didn't mention and talk about it that much until I knew it was like a reality. I had the cover done. Shout out to Kira Hartford. She's the greatest cover artist and book designer on the planet. And she has her own books. I think you interviewed her recently.
I think so. As soon as you mentioned it, it's like, yeah, I think I did. I think I
Yeah, yeah.
did mention, yeah, now that you mention, I think I do remember interview. Yes, yes, I actually did. I think it was either January or February that I had her on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
show.
House of Starling is her book series, the Sundering
Yes,
Friend. So she's my cover artist, my book designer. She will be for all four books. So this is a 4-book series. And she is the designer. She's the cover artist. She's the lady with the plan. So I tapped into her as a resource to make sure that the cover was done, and I had a bunch of character art done. Once all of that was nailed down was when I really started talking to people in my personal life about this. And then that's when, the response was great from them too. Very positive. They were very, very supportive. I'm grateful to have a very close, tight knit family. My parents, my brother, my sister in law, my niece and nephew. And then a large extended family as well. And so everybody was very supportive. It was a very positive response. My grandmother, who is in her late 80s, almost 90, she read it and she said she enjoyed it very much. So for me, that makes me a success. So my grandmother at almost 90 years old read it and enjoyed it.
That's awesome, Zaid. That is absolutely incredible. So looking back on, when the book was published and released, did you get that sense of validation in the sense that your promise and your goals for this book were met by the outpours of reviews or feedbacks from your beta readers and ARC readers?
I do think so. Particularly even after publishing, I've had some people who've read the book uh, leave reviews on Goodreads, and they've left really really kind words about these themes that I intertwine into the narrative, and how it affected them and how much they appreciated it. And so to me that seems like a win. It seems like people are receptive to the kinds of important things that I wanted to talk about.
Hmm.
And if I can continue to do that throughout the series, I think there are different but equally important conversations that happen in book two. And now that I'm done plotting. Now that I'm drafting book three, I'm trying to do the same thing. Find different but equally important messages and themes that I want to infuse into these books.
Absolutely, 100%. And that kind of leads into the next question, which is what I call the first reflective question, which I would love to hear your thoughts on, Zaid, which is, as authors, when we write our first books, we imprint a little bit of ourselves into our projects because, these are works of love. They are years of hard work and dedication. A lot of money goes into these books. And
Oh
especially
yeah.
in the digital age, it's a 50-50 double-edged sword kind of mentality where, yes, on one side, social media is a huge tool for us indie self-published authors because we're able to reach a wide variety of readers, new authors as well to collaborate with, as well as fellow editors and so forth. On the other side of the coin, we do find ourselves exposed and vulnerable and unfortunately open to, trolls, hate speech, spam, and so forth. And that could be very detrimental on authors' mental health as well as their overall well being. And of course, imposter syndrome is always going to be there waiting for the time to strike.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
Saeed, have you ever had those moments of heightened anxiety or imposter syndrome? And if so, or if not, what has disciplined you to continue with this series? Because it's one thing to write a book that's initially going to be a standalone book, but then realize you fall in love with the world you've created and want to expand more. Because that's how I feel. Whenever I write my books, I initially think this is going to be a standalone book, but the world building that I've created, I realize I can't get rid of this story. I can't get rid of this world just in one book. I have to flesh it out even more.
Explore. Yeah, yeah. Um, Gabriel, I will challenge you to find any author or creative who has not felt imposter syndrome at some point, because I feel like that's all of us. I definitely so many times, almost every day, I feel like I feel imposter syndrome. I mean, I sit here next to this 600-page fantasy story that I wrote, and I still will sit down with a laptop and say, "Wow, this is trash." And so it's a balance, you have to. For me, I have to try to find a balance between um, understanding my limitations or what it is that is holding me back, whether that be like a mental block or an emotional block or whatever it may be. I find a balance of that with the confidence to say, well, you know what, I have something important to say, and through the many number of drafts, I can find the best way to say it. I think the drafting process of having multiple drafts is what saves me from the imposter syndrome every time. If writing were a one and done and you have to do, nail it on your first draft, I think I would have given up. But
Mm.
because of the fact that I have so many different attempts and tries, in draft one, I'm just word vomiting. Sorry, that's a gross way of saying it, but I'm just putting as many words down on the paper as possible, on the laptop as possible. It's I'll even to the point where I'll have one thing that I want to say, and I'll have a character say it 5 different ways
Right.
in the same dialogue, because I know in draft 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, I'm going to be cutting that down, and I'll be finding the best way to say it. So I think what really saves me from imposter syndrome is the drafting process, is the fact that I know that, it's okay for this not to be good with my first draft, because I have a number of tries ahead of me where I'm going to perfect it and make it the best version that I can make it. It's not just going to be me. I'm going to have a bunch of readers' eyes on it. And so they'll help me, throughout the drafting process, make it better and better and better. It really does take a village to release a book. There's no way I'd be able to do it on my own. There's so many. If I sat here and listed every author and creative on Instagram who helped me throughout this process, we'd be here all day. Particularly Kira and Essie Rowley, who's also on Instagram. She has been monumental in my journey. She is reading book 3 as I write it now, and she's always willing to be there to, anything I throw at her, she critiques it. She gives me positive feedback. She uplifts me. She empowers me. So having people like Essie and Kira on my side, and a number of other people, Katrina Lewis, she's another author, LJ Stanton, a lot of people, Emmy Hamilton. There's just been such this village of people that are all in my acknowledgments, and who I couldn't have done this without. So really, that's what helps me with the imposter syndrome, is the drafting process and the community that I've built to help empower me.
Absolutely. And you mentioned SC Riley, which I feel I have had her on the show before. That name sounds so familiar.
I'm trying to think. Maybe you have. I'm not sure.
I'll have to look back at my interviews to find her out, or maybe through my messages. But that name definitely sounds so
You might have seen
familiar,
her
and
on
possibly
Instagram.
is.
Maybe you've
Oh,
seen her account on Instagram.
possibly. I'll have to look
Yeah.
back. But going forward from that, because you mentioned quite a few people, and all these people that, especially Akira, who you mentioned again, when I was having her on the show, I think she also began around, not too long ago, like in like the early 2020s during the
Yep.
lockdown era, which kind of brings up a question which I love sharing with my guests now, which is this debate of, did a golden age emerge during those 4 years in the lockdown, the quarantine? And a lot of people have given their thoughts on it. And I myself was one of those people. I began writing in 2019, 2020 at the height, the early few months of the lockdown. And everyone gives their own answer to this. So, Zaid, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think that a golden age did emerge during those 4 years in lockdown?
You mean generally, or for me personally?
Um, Generally speaking, and also your own personal thoughts on it.
Generally speaking, yeah, absolutely. I think for many, many people, and not just for writers or creatives, throughout a whole bunch of industries, you have
Mm-hmm.
this era where people are being forced to sit at home and with their thoughts. And so I think that was like a breeding ground for storytelling, where you have a whole
Mhm.
bunch of people who had all these ideas and no time to do it, but now you have all the time in the world to do nothing else but write. So generally speaking, absolutely. For me personally, I don't think it affected me that much, only because around that time I was getting ready to get married.
Right.
We got married in 2020, my wife and I. And so I wasn't really thinking about writing or storytelling or anything like that because I was very, very busy. But it was shortly after the lockdown, when we came back, is when my friend reached out to me to join the writing group.
Right.
So while it wasn't particularly for me that important, it was definitely a golden age for creatives in general. And then shortly after that, 2021 is when my golden age started.
Right. Absolutely. And this is why I like to ask this question, because during those 4 years, a whole wave of creators came out, especially indie authors. A lot of indie authors really emerged during those 4 years, and also musicians, artists, people began their own businesses because, it was a way to break the monotonous that was happening all
Yeah.
around the world. It was a way to break the boredom so we didn't go stir crazy. And that leads into the discussion of building one's brand and creating a business, which now segues perfectly into the second part of the interview. So Saeed, as I think you mentioned before, you went the direction of self-published author, and I'm curious, once you had your book at the finished version that it was, how much research did you really look into to see if traditional publishing, hybrid publishing, or self-publishing was the right one for you?
Um, I made the decision pretty early on in the process that I wanted to self-publish as opposed to traditionally publish.
Hmm.
Um, and the main reason for that was I had, after once I realized, after joining this writing group and after doing the first draft, once I realized that I have something that I want to publish, it dawned on me that this is a lifelong dream, and I was at the time I was 32 years old, and I was like, it's been 32 years of me wanting to do this. I don't
Hmm.
think, because querying and trying to become traditionally published can take time.
Yes.
I think that's a fair statement. It's not like, you send out your first. I mean, for some people, maybe it happens where they just send out one query letter, and next thing you know, they have an agent. But I know for a lot of people, it takes many, many, many rejections, and I don't have a problem with rejection. I just had a problem with investing the time to try to find an agent. And so I knew pretty early on that I wanted to self-publish, and that way the schedule is on my time, the publishing is on me, doing the cover however I want it is on me. All of my creative decisions are all on me. The messages are all on me. Everything is my own personal work and effort. And that's something that I wanted. I wanted it to really be something that I put all of my effort into. And so I made that decision very early on that I wanted to self-publish. There was a little bit of research. I listened to some podcasts, and I did as much research as I could online regarding traditional publishing. But I had my heart pretty early. I had my heart set on self-publishing.
Absolutely. And also with self-publishing, that also comes with its own set of things to really look into, which is, of course, cover artists, editors, balancing, finances, and marketing, which is probably the hugest thing for any author.
Yeah,
So let's dive into those aspects, starting off with, of course, the audience, understanding one's audience,
yeah.
and also understanding the readership. So, starting off with the audience, as authors, we know who the target audience is first and foremost, starting off with us, because if we enjoy writing the book, then possibly others will enjoy writing the book as well. And some people have their own views on this. Some people write for themselves, others write for people like them who enjoy similar things. And many people have different takes on when an author should consider the audience. Some people think you need to know who your audience is during the initial drafting phase, while others argue they should consider the audience during the marketing phase. And there's no right or wrong answer to this. It's up to interpretation. But for you, Zaid, where did you really understand your audience during the process?
I think because I started with my own personal goal of drafting this story that has these themes intertwined into it.
Mm,
um, I didn't think so much about the audience in the early stages. I just kind of wanted to get the story out and get it out in a way that I felt was true to how I wanted to tell it.
right.
um, and I think that led to a lot of conversations with my developmental editor. Her name is LJ Stanton, and she and I had a lot of conversations over what I wanted to say, how I wanted to say it, and what audience it would reach, and whether it wasn't going to reach an audience at all.
Mm,
And she was very, very, her as well as a lot of my beta readers, they were very like certain, they knew like, okay, this is something that's not going to work with an audience. And then they were certain with, okay, this is something that will work with the audience. And so the audience ended up being fantasy readers and people who enjoy sci-fi and science fantasy. But that's not something that I had in mind as I was writing it. That came
mm.
throughout the many drafts and the many stages of editing. um, and that's still something that I think I struggle with a little bit, only because while I'm blessed to have so many people who've read and enjoyed the book, I do feel like I still have a kind of a mindset of, well, I need to tell this story that's truest to myself, even if the audience may not like it. That's
Mm.
fine. I just want to remain as true to the core of what I want to say as possible. Um, I never really felt that I need to write to an audience, because I feel like if I write what's true to me and true to what I want to say, the right audience will find the book, if I do marketing properly. But I don't know, that's really something that I think I struggle with, is really writing to an audience and writing to market. And I think I have to work on that. I have to work on marketing, because it makes me, I just don't think I'm as I write too much to myself and not
Right.
enough to an audience.
Absolutely. And from there, we talk about, the readership, the individual people that are going to pick up our books. And within the genres we write for, there's also the reader group, middle grade, YA, NA, and AF, which have their own set of rules and expectations for the author to follow. So, Zaid, where would you consider the Ore Monger to fall under, and how much of a challenge was it to write for that particular reader group, that age group specifically?
This is definitely a very adult story. There's no, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. This is a very, very adult story,
Mm,
18 plus. There's a lot of, I mean, my trigger warning list is huge, even for adults, because it's just the when you have things that you want to say that relate to geopolitics and society. um, I think there's obviously ways that you can do these things with a younger group, but I just don't know how to do that. I only know how to say it as it is, and it's not it's not something that's meant for kids or for even a younger audience, NA or YA, when it's so entrenched in real world politics and real world war and
Right.
genocide and things like that. There's no for me, I didn't know how to say that to a younger audience. The only way I knew how to say that was how it is, and it's,
Mhm.
it's violent, it's brutal, it's heartbreaking, it's gut wrenching, it's difficult to talk about. There's language, adult language, there's adult content, mild sexuality, but not too much,
Mm.
and really, really a lot of violence. And so this sort of thing, and then also like one of the big themes is institutions of control and cults, and
Mm.
how these how these actors of manipulation work and coercion work. I did a lot of research on that because it was something that interested me, and so I had a sensitivity reader for that as well. And so these are themes that I think pretty early on I wanted to express in very adult ways, and so it wasn't challenging at all for me to stay in that zone, because as I wrote it and as I added more nuance, it just became more and more of an adult story.
Absolutely. And that also ties into, staying true to an author's vision and the integrity of the story, which is it's a tightrope balancing act between your individuality as an author while also, referencing story elements from previous authors, because we're always going to be influenced by books that we grew up reading. That's the name of the game. But it's a very delicate balancing act. So for you, Zaid, how would you say your book balances not only your voice, your individuality as the author, but it also is familiar to readers of the genre that are going to understand the themes you're talking about, as well as your approach to those themes? Because I know a lot of authors write on probably similar themes, but how they approach it and how they interweave it in the story is unique to them.
Yeah. So I as I was drafting and as I was thinking about the different things that I wanted to talk about, the themes, I did want to make it, unique to how I express it, and how, I mean, obviously there are books out there, I'm sure, that are addressing similar themes. But as you were saying, it's important to stay unique to how I
Mm.
wanted to express things. We talked a little bit earlier about how a lot of fantasy is grounded in medieval Europe and is
Yes.
very Eurocentric, and so I think a big part of it was, along with the themes and the messaging and the important topics that I wanted to talk about, I wanted to do it in a way that was relatable, or that included different cultures and things outside of this sort of Eurocentric bubble of fantasy books. And so that's, I think, what was most unique for me in terms of my storytelling, was in breaking out of that sort of Eurocentric bubble, and seeing how the same themes and topics are viewed, but maybe from different cultures. And so, especially, including for the shapeshifters, including my own culture in there was very important. Um, that's something that I don't know if I see a lot of in fantasy.
Mm.
And so being able to express myself in with terms and things that are familiar to me, I think was made it a lot easier for me to talk about the different heavier topics.
Absolutely. And I've had a lot of authors, voice similar thing that, for high epic fantasy and even for sci-fi fantasy in general, we have like this particular viewpoint of how those books should read or how the world should be like. But that's the thing about when it comes to writing and creativity, is that they can take on multitude different shapes. And honestly, I've met a lot of authors. I've been fortunate, I should say, that I've met a lot of authors who write fantasy and sci-fi, but they take different approaches and provide different stories. which I absolutely love. And honestly, that's probably, again, the most beautiful thing about storytelling is that we can share these different cultures together to showcase, their stories are just as epic as medieval Europe and should be treated with the same respect. We don't want
Oh
to,
yeah, absolutely.
downplay them, but we also don't want
Yeah.
them to be like caricature versions, but like
Oh yeah, yeah.
drop from some inspirations from each culture and make something new of it. So that way people can understand. Like, case in point from my story, Michael Last Angel of Earth, which is a high epic fantasy, deals with a lot of religious theology
Mhm.
and has a lot of religious metaphors and teachings. And in the way, it's respectful to, all three religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, where even if you're not a person of faith, you can still enjoy the story. And one of the characters, one of the villains, is Javurmas. I'm probably butchering his name, which is bad because I created the name, but he is a Raksha, a man eater from, I forgot where in some kind of India that the Rakshas are from, but they're tied to Indian mythology, and the lore about them is just so fascinating. It's like I have to include because it's a way to show that, again, other cultures have their own takes of, villains or monsters. It's like, why not? And ultimately this boils down to, again, what we talked about, creating our own book that's unique and showcasing our identity. But that kind of runs into a very big problem, which leads into the next question, which, brace yourself, Saeed, this is a very loaded question.
Okay.
So brace
I'm
yourself.
ready. I'm
So
holding on.
so I've been doing this show now for about 7 years, and with your video, it will make it 302 videos, 200 subscribers, and that includes author interviews, historian interviews, my other series, book impressions, historians lounge, comic interviews, the works. And I've learned a
Very
lot from.
impressive. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Zaid. And I've learned a lot from a lot of these people. And the one unmistakable truth that I've come to learn is that in this industry, there are two paths: to be an author, to be known as an author. One's dedicated to storytelling, the other's dedicated to marketing. And ultimately, they both lead to the same goal: world renowned success, critically acclaimed, literacy acclaimed, etc. But as I said in the beginning, the second path is the most enticing, and that leads to a lot of unrealistic goals and expectations. And the truth of the matter is, in this industry, if you're an author, editor, narrator, or publisher, this is not a get rich quick money scheme. You are not going to be a multi-millionaire from your first book. There are exceptions to the rule, of course. There are many successful people whose first projects did give them that status, and all the power to them. That's not an
Yeah.
easy thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But generally speaking, there's a 50-50 chance, or not even a 50-50 chance, your first project is going to be a financial success or
Yeah.
a financial flop. And it ultimately comes down to mindset. Are you
Yeah.
writing because you enjoy writing, or do you want to build a career slash brand off of it? Which I turn over to you, Zaid, to hear your thoughts on this discussion, which I've noticed, which is, in the industry, again, there's no guarantee that your book or whatever project you're working on is going to be the start of your legacy, but it shouldn't stop you pursuing it if you're truly passionate about it. But understand, realistically, it's going to be a while before you can live off of this as a career. Do you agree with this sentiment, or do you not agree with this sentiment?
Oh yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I think it's important to be realistic. I mean, it's always good to be optimistic, but
Yes.
realism is really, you have to be realistic about these things. I, if anybody came to me and said that that was their goal, I'd be very happy for them, and I'd hope that they, work hard for it. But as you said, you summarized it very well. It's probably not going to happen off of somebody's first project. You have rare exceptions to that rule, but the likelihood is that it takes a lot of time before, and a lot of market, especially if you're self-published. I mean, it's
Right.
hard enough for a traditionally published author for their first book to be a massive success. As a self-published author, you've got a lot more against you. So unless you're a master at marketing, or you hit a really specific niche that makes you blow up, or whatever it may be, that first book is probably, it's going to be hard to make a career off of that. Um, Personally, for me, I've just never. Were you asking for me, or am I going into something that's not
Oh
a
no, no,
question?
no. Like I think you answered like, like it sounds like you're kind of almost like agreeing with like, the sentiment that, in this industry, you do have to be realistic and understand that,
Yeah,
it's not a guarantee your first book is going to be like a success, but if you
right.
understand your long-term goals in this industry, I think you're going to be fine.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I've never had the goal since I started this. I've never had the goal that my writing is going to become my full-time job or my main income source. I'm just doing this for fun. It's you mentioned it earlier. It's extremely expensive
Yes, yes, it
to
is.
be a self-published author. But I'm doing it just for the love of storytelling. I don't expect this to become my full-time income at any point. I mean, if it does by some fluke, sure, I take it. But do I expect that? No, I just have a story that I really want to tell. I have a lot of really important things that I want to talk about, and that's my goal. My goal is already achieved. I wanted to publish a book. I've published a book, so my goal is 100% achieved. If I release more books, it'll be 200, 300, and 400% achieved. But at this point, my goal is 100% achieved. I published a fantasy novel, something that I've wanted to do my whole life. There's nothing more to that. I don't, that's not for everybody. I know a lot of people do want more, want the fame, the success, and whatever else might come from publishing many novels. But it was just all about the storytelling for me. That's something that I watched Brandon Sanderson's lectures on YouTube. He
Mm.
has writing courses on YouTube, and something that's something that he stressed a lot is that this should be about storytelling. You
Yes.
should want to get your story out, and that should be what this is about, and everything else, success and everything, should follow you if you do it enough. But for me, I just wanted to be able to say that I've published a book, and I have, so I'm a success in my eyes.
Absolutely. And also, as self-published authors, it will take time until we get like, our book out there, maybe our 15th or 20th, whatever book
Yeah,
really gets our name out there. That is fine. It may not be your first book, it may not be your debut novel. That is completely fine because a lot of authors that we've admired, their books that we know them for, were probably not even the ones that were the first idea that came to me. It was probably on the back burner. And look what happened. All they got a whole bunch of fans over a series of years, and they're able to build their legacy. That's how we have to view it.
yeah,
And also, what's important is networking and building one's crew. And that is especially true for self published slash indie authors. Now, I know, Zaid, you've mentioned quite a few people throughout this interview: S.C. Riley, Kiara Hartford, and a few others. Are there any other people you'd like to give a personal shout out to who have helped you along the way with your journey as an author?
oh man, really putting me on the spot with how it's so many people to name. I would be here all day. I mean, Kira and Essie immediately come to mind because of how much they helped me on the daily. LJ Stanton was my developmental editor. Emmy Hamilton was somebody that I reached out to very early on, when she's written incredible books, um, the Destined series, as well as another duology that she's working on. She's an incredible author, and I reached out to her very early on at the release of her first book. And she's been constantly there to help me with anything I need. Same thing with Katrina Lewis. I reached out to her before I even had a writing Instagram. I just had my personal Instagram, and I reached out to
Right.
her and I said that I want to break out into, I'm doing this. I'm writing my book. This was in early 2021, and I was like, I just started drafting my book, and she was like, well, you should make an author Instagram, and so that's how that started. Amanda Anderson, Rose Thompson. She's been there to help me with sensitivity reads and all kinds of other things, anything I need. My copy editor from the last from the Ore Monger, Rebecca Scharf. She's at Scrollwork Edits.
Mm.
Just a master of language, and she's incredible. And so anything she's helped me turn this. The Ore Monger wouldn't have been released without her. It's so many people. If I continue, I'm trying to think. I had people who, because of all these cultures that I wanted to include, the influence from Japanese culture. I had people
Right.
that I was talking to um, who were helping me with making sure that that was authentic. Same thing with Spain. I had people from Spain who were I was talking to, and they were helping me to make sure that everything was authentic. It's just a village. It's so many people. My friend Dan, who first started me on the journey by asking me to be part of the writing group. Um, it's so many people, so many people. I could go on and on, and I hope I haven't missed anybody. I'm gonna get some DMs later, like, "Hey, hello, why didn't I get mentioned?"
All
If I
right.
have missed anyone, I'm sorry.
It happens to the best of us, Zaid. It happens to the best of us. And all that said, we now arrived at the final question of this incredible author's interview, and here it is. With everything you've learned thus far, Zaid, from the first book, The Oremonger, to now the next two books in the series, what is your word of wisdom to fellow authors who want to begin their author's journey today or possibly this year?
um, for authors who want to start their journey, I would say, stay true to your story, stay true to yourself, stay true to your story. Um, it's so important to have readers. It's so important to have editors, and it's so important to have all of these knowledgeable people as a resource. People who have been through it, ask a lot of questions, but at the end of the day, you know what's best for your story. You know what's best for who you are and how you want to tell the story. And so just stay true to yourself. Don't change anything that you feel like is not true to who you are and the story that you want to tell.
Absolutely
And
couldn't
good luck.
agree more. Couldn't agree more, Zaid. And with that, viewers and listeners, we conclude another amazing author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. A huge thank you to Zaid Hasan for making his official debut here on the channel, all the way from New York. Now, Zaid,
Thank you,
before
Gabe.
we close out, you're welcome. Where can people find you on social media to reach out and chat with you, as well as stay up to date with the next books in the series? And where can people purchase the Oremonger if they want to add it to their collection?
So to reach me, my DMs on Instagram are always open. I am at Hassan Fantasy, HASANFANTASY. And you can also, I have a website, hassanfantasy.com. And you can always reach out to me by email, contact@hassanfantasy.com. But mostly I'm very, very active on Instagram. My DMs are always open. I'm always open to chatting about the books or the themes that are in the books or anything creative related. Um, and so that's where you can reach me. The Oremonger is available, sorry, by ebook in many, many, many different places. I have a link, bookstoread.com/oremonger. It's books, the number two, read.com/oremonger. And that will send you to all of the various different places where you can get the ebook globally. The paperback is available. The standard paperback is available on Amazon as well as Barnes and Noble, and then the signed paperbacks are available through my website. And that's it. And thank you again for having me so much, Gabriel. I appreciate it. This was a fantastic interview. Sorry if I rambled too much.
Oh no, you are fine, Z. You're absolutely fine. And I will provide all those links down below in the description of this video. And be on the lookout from me for a Wandering Quill book impressions on the Ore Monger that will be coming out this year. Don't know which month, but it will be coming out this year. So be on the lookout for that review. And as always, viewers and listeners, thank you so much for joining us for another episode today. A huge thank you to Zaid for making his official debut on the channel, and hopefully not the last time we see him. Hopefully he will come back on the show to tell us all about book 2 and book 3, and
Yeah, I would love
possibly
to.
another one entirely, a new series he's probably working on.
Yeah, maybe we'll see.
All right. As always, viewers and listeners, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below. And this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, wishing you all a wonderful Friday wherever you are in the world.